Our next session is Researching Android Device Security with the Help of a Droid Army by Joshua Drake.
Thanks. Test. Oh, is that good? Can you hear me? All right. Can everybody hear me in the room? Everybody good? In the back? No. Tell the AV guy. Test. Oh, that's much better, but almost scary. Test. All right. You guys can hear me in the back now? All right. Oh, yeah. I don't have much voice for that. So. Well, welcome to today's session, everybody. The talk, as Alan said, is researching Android device security with the help of the Droid Army. It's a pretty fun little talk about some fun project I did while authoring my parts of the Android Hacker's Handbook. It's a long, grueling process if anyone's ever tried to write a book, and this is kind of like the project that kept me from wanting to kill myself while doing that. You know, kept me able to do something fun, and then I could sit and write for a while and then go back. I can't do anything more. You want me to put it in my mouth or something? Hello? Yep. Choose the podium. You want to try podium? There we go. You guys are limiting my mobility. This is supposed to be a mobile talk, right? So let's get on with it. So this is a little agenda. I'm going to do a little introduction to the material, a little bit more than what I already done, but that already covers a little bit of it. I'm going to talk about how I built this, giving information on kind of how to do it yourself, and then I'll talk about what makes it tick. You know, that's really the details behind how you can build one yourself, and then I'll talk about what the sort of things you can do with it. And you know, I'll give you a little bit of information about some of the simple things you can do with it up front, but we'll see some of the more extravagant things or more difficult things in the end. And then I'll do some demos showing some of those. And then with a brief conclusion and QA. So introduction, this is the who and why. That's me. He introduced me, Alan, thank you. And so anybody who doesn't know me, I'm jduck. I've been doing this as a hobby for 20 years. Security has a hobby for 20 years, and professionally for 10 years. So I kind of averaged it out at 15, I don't know. There was some time when I did security stuff for like a free shell account, and that doesn't really count as professional, but you know, it's somewhere to start. So I'm a lead author of Android Hacker's Handbook, so I helped, you know, wrangle people to help me get that done. I also am the Director of Research Science over at Document Labs and founder of the DroidSec group. So that actually was something I founded before the book started. Previously at Rapid7 Metasploit, I wrote a lot of exploits for Metasploit there and did some back-end dev and even some commercial dev there. And at Veritone iDefense Labs before that, doing vulnerability research. So the motivation for building this Droid Army was really to deal with this problem of fragmentation. And I know this is kind of a bad word in Google land, like people at Google hate this term, and you see it in the press and the media though, and I think it's a pretty fair term. You know, you end up with different devices being different from each other, even to the point where if you have like a good example is a Samsung Galaxy S3 or something. There's probably 5 different hardware models of a Galaxy S3. You wouldn't think that there would be actually like 5 different innards of one, but there are. And those changes of the hardware make the changes to the software as well, and changes to compilation settings between the carriers. And you know, a lot of things can change. Every sort of device is like a unique snowflake, and it's really difficult to get a good view of how that affects security for any individual device without really being able to look at all of them. And also, Android development is scattered, and that feeds into all these changes that may happen in weird places, like Google making changes. That's pretty unified, but the OEMs like LG may make different changes than Samsung or Motorola, and you know, it just goes down the line. Even when you might have Samsung with the S3, they've got 2 different innards, so one might have like a a different, for example, gyro or something in it, and it'll require a completely different driver that's architected completely differently, perhaps. So the effects of this are really that, like, a lot of vulnerabilities are maybe present on only one single device model. Like, in that 6-month window when they were deving and creating this device and pushing it out the door, somebody made a mistake along the way, and so there may only be one device. Or it may be that one of the external people who dev a driver for a Wi-Fi card or something, they may have made a mistake, and it may affect like a small range of devices or even a wide range of devices. It really depends. So I put this screenshot from Twitter in here where I was talking to one of Qualcomm's security engineers. He mentioned an advisory was released, and I said, well, Cedric said, that's a nice advisory. That looks like a really neat bug, but like, what really is vulnerable? And it's interesting because, like, this guy says that they don't really know, because although Qualcomm develops like the code that feeds kind of the back from kind of low level, right? They're developing kind of a golden image, if you will, and they give that to the OEMs, and then they'll make changes and stuff. So they don't really have visibility into that. They don't have every device. They don't have a way to test this or a way to know what happens kind of after they release their code. And a last point here, like some vulnerabilities are only really exploitable on a different subset of on a subset of devices, or sometimes a single device, and that's it's an important distinction to make, because the existence of vulnerability and the ability to exploit it are two different things, and in this day and age, the space between those are getting much larger. So some vulnerability may be present on a device, but it may not be exploitable if you really try to dig it into it, because of some small change that also could have threw a wrench in the machine. So this causes you to have to kind of duplicate your research a lot of times. So if you're auditing, for example, the radio interface layer, the RAL for a bunch of different phones, you may have to redo this over and over again in order to get an accurate picture of the whole landscape. It also could mean that the attack surface, like I mentioned with the gyro driver, might be architected differently. Maybe one of them has an exposed device driver node in the dev file system, and it's exposed to everybody, so any app could access it, but maybe the other one, it doesn't have any device driver nodes. It speaks to the kernel in a different way or something. So I've seen this quite a few times, and it can mean a big difference in security posture for the device. So with these things in mind, like, physical devices really become a requirement for Android security research if you want to get a broad look at things, especially considering the whole device, not just Google only code or something like that. One thing I didn't mention, even with Google only code, like, different Android devices are going to have different versions. Sorry, did I say that right? Different Android devices are going to have different versions of Android. It all depends, right? Like, some might have 4.4, some might have 4.2 or 4.3, or like 2.3. Some are really old. They have like 2.1 or even older. And that also is like an important thing to keep in mind. A lot of devices don't get updated regularly after they hit like even 1 year, or even there have been devices that were released and have never received an update ever. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. And that's one of the reasons why physical devices are important. Another point on that is that the hardware is definitely like something that's important, and there's, with device drivers exposing attack surface, you really need to have those actual hardware devices there in order to probe them and try to see if something crashes. If you don't have them, then you have to basically turn around and emulate the actual hardware, and that can be really difficult given the wide range of hardware that's out there. So what is a Droid Army? This is a term that just means it's an always-on, accessible Android device, cluster, and we'll go on more about that. Let's do a quick demo real quick. I got the shell here. How did I go to that? All right. So this is just a script that. So the first thing that the tools do is they map devices to like a human-friendly name. If you look at this is like all the serial numbers for the devices that are plugged in. I'm going to get rid of that real quick. So that is obviously not a very friendly way to look at the devices, and we'll do it real quick again. Like, do you want to really remember these massive hex digit strings? when you want to talk to an individual device that you know what you have. And so instead, we end up with human-friendly names, and we can do things like run a command real quick against all the devices. This will, I'm like nervous for some reason. How about we do this? Fingerprint. Look at that. So this command real quick, it's just running all against all the devices, and as you can see before, there's 48 plugged in right now. This shows you the carrier, the device model, code name. It shows you some of them, you can see the radio where it says CDMA, and you can see not only the Android version, but sort of a vendor-specific version number that's there. So, I mean, this is a really nice command to get a nice kind of overall picture of what's plugged in. There's also like a couple other scripts where you can, like, if there's a new device, oh, I can't believe that crashed. Let's see this one. See, that one works. So if another thing that's problematic when you have so many Android devices is you end up with devices that you plug in or remove, and you want to be able to quickly provision a new device if you get one. So you just plug it in, you run like the scan thing, and it'll tell you like, hey, there's a new device, and then it'll add it to this list. You can give it a human-friendly name then. So that's kind of like one thing. You can also do, you can run any command on these guys. Oh, wrong window. So let's try to see what other commands we got in my history. This might be interesting. Might be some good ones in there. I'll do, let's see, RM something. And we can look and see what we can do a subset of stuff. Like this will say what are the permissions for the shell user over ADB for these three devices which I specified. So there's a bunch of little stuff you can do that's real quick and easy. And I mean, that's just a taste of what you can get from that. We'll look at some more later. So why did what kind of inspired me? What inspired me was not only dealing with the fragmentation problem, but I also saw that the fragmentation problem isn't new, right? It was something that was already an existing problem in the application developer space. So people were creating apps that have this particular user interface, and they wanted to know, would their app look right on all the devices, or what happens since the code underneath can change so vastly across all the devices. They wanted to know, like, what happens if you click the big button on my app? Like, is it just going to crash my app because of some OEM change, or is it going to work? And so they've dealt with this problem, and these companies here, I don't know how to say it, Apkudo, they inspired me. This is their picture on the right here of their setup. And when I saw this, I was like, I got to have one of those for sure. Definitely fun. A few others, Test Droid, AppToAct. These are like a little bit newer ones. And these guys are all focused on app testing. And then there was also Xamarin Test Cloud, but they got bought by somebody, and I think they kind of phased out their Android stuff. So the problem with these, I mean, great, they're out there, right? They have lots of devices, far more than I even have at this point. But the problem is they're focused on app testing. They're not security friendly necessarily, right? Like, it's possible that you may be able to contact them and work with them, and they'll be okay with you rooting all their devices and then doing some testing. But it's pretty unlikely that they're going to agree to that. A lot of them say specifically, like, we never root our devices. And that's important, I think, because once you root a device, it kind of invalidates whether or not it's going to function kind of like from a factory point of view, especially for app developers, because they don't ever need to deal with stuff at that low a level. So the other thing is, like, what about exfiltrating data? Are they okay with that? Are they okay with you poking and prodding all their devices and pulling out a bunch of sensitive stuff like serial numbers, and do they want you to do that? Or are you going to get mad? Physical proximity requirements. Sometimes you screw something up in security. You run your fuzzer or whatever. You do one little test and the device locks up or something. You've got to go power cycle it. That's not an option when the thing is running in somebody else's lab, across the country. If I break one right now, we're kind of stuck on that one, although I can eliminate it from the list. And the other thing is OPSEC fail, and this is really important for exploit development or even vulnerability research, like doing testing. If you're trying to keep these things secret for whatever reason, you don't want to leave your exploit code or your fuzzer or anything like that on somebody else's equipment. It's just definitely not a good idea. So the answer is just to build your own. So let's talk about what I did through the process. And I'm currently on version 3.5 of the cluster, so that kind of gives you an idea of how much I went through to get where I am today. So the first design was really simple. I just got a big-ass hub, and you'll see it in a second. And I've got lots of devices. I started asking everybody. I was like, oh, you got any extra phones that you don't need anymore? You know, got a bunch. Connected everything together. It cost me $75. A couple of handshakes and high fives, hugs, whatever. And then, so I got a few devices. A little side note real quick. This is what I learned about acquiring devices through all the things that I experimented with. Obviously, you can ask around. That was my first one. You know, like anybody who doesn't need an Android device, like that's definitely the best and cheapest way to get it. You know, maybe $5 or maybe, like I said, just a hug. eBay is good. One thing to look out for there, you can get devices with cracked screens, although the screens work. A lot of the stuff you don't need the screen, but sometimes it's nice to still be able to touch the screen for when it gets in a weird state. Bad ESN phones, it's not really that important if you can't register on a cell phone network unless you're really trying to do baseband research or something like that. So these things can be way cheaper, especially the bad ESN phones. Like if somebody's selling you a cell phone that you can't ever use on a network, to them that means it's worthless. But to a security researcher, it's like, it still boots, it still has all the code, and almost everything works. The only thing that doesn't work is making phone calls. And even that, like if you have your own like BTS or something, it doesn't matter if it's a bad ESN, because the bad ESN usually is a blacklist on the back end. So they're like, I want to register. They're like, no, you're stolen. So if you have your own BTS, all the phones can work, potentially. Facebook garage sale is great. My wife discovered, like, there's a lot of people on there. They're like, I want to get rid of my phone for like $50 or whatever. Got a lot of there. Craigslist and Swappa, people get emotionally attached to their devices on there, and they want to sell it to you for, you know, like 2 cents less than they bought it for. So be careful there. Sometimes you have to buy new devices. If your goal is to do security research on the latest and greatest device, you're kind of going to buy the new one, right? You're going to have an option. And you can do contracts, but then you're going to pay thousands of dollars for nothing. And you know, you don't even need one on the cell service. So prepaid phones can be good too, but they really don't want you to buy these super cheap and then never register them, although that's a perfectly viable option. There's nothing to stop you from never registering the phone. So I want to give a big thank you to all the people listed here, and I'd like to give them a hand if you guys would. So these are all the people that helped me, gave me devices. We got some people in the room. James here in the Viking hat, he gave me although it was a big troll, I hate him for that. But that doesn't matter. The thought was there, and that's good heart. So some of these other guys are around here too. I've seen a few of them. So they're all great, and all the people, there's more people I haven't listed because I either couldn't get a hold of them or I figured they just wouldn't want me to list them on here. So here is and I know we've been waiting to see this picture for a while. We've got all this like side notes and thank yous and devices, right? But this is the first kind of iteration, and it's almost like not the first iteration. Like it's like this is 0.7. I didn't take a picture of 0.5, but 0.5 was basically like 2 of these phones and then that phone in the back, and that was it, and that hub. This hub, it's called the Mondo hub, and it's 28 ports. The 2 lines across in the middle where you see the numbers, those are all hardware buttons where you can like push and depress it to turn off each port. It's kind of a neat hub, but I'm not a big fan of it, so we'll get into that in a few minutes. So this was the first iteration. The second iteration is 0.8. I got a few more devices, a couple of dev boards, reorganized things so that I can make more space. Got a tablet. I got some more devices. At this point, I really called it 1.0, and I really started to recognize the patterns that I could see from having so many devices plugged in. You know, I could run a command, and they would show me like what are the system on chip of all the devices, and kind of put them into groups. And then I could do things like see particular drivers that were part of a particular system on chip that would be across a different, that group of devices. And so that was really helpful to see, and it was really interesting, and it really felt rewarding at this point. So here's July 2013. That's like a big 7-month jump there. This is right before I did a talk at Recon, and I actually put this slide in or this picture in that slide deck. Although that talk was not about the cluster. I did this talk partially because when I did shows people this picture, they got really excited about this, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should go and talk about just that. But that talk was about the binary stuff that's on the Android devices, the proprietary code. So this one is kind of like, it's getting bigger. I think at this point I had like maybe 27 or something devices. But at this point, disaster struck. So one day I like get up and like half the cluster is missing and I don't know what the hell's going on. So I like start frantically like pushing all the buttons on the hub and seeing what's happening. And what happened was the Mondo hub, it just gave up. Like some of the ports completely died. Some of the ports would sometimes work and devices would come on and off. And it got really weird. And it turns out that the Mondo hub actually, although it's 28 ports, it only comes with a 4 amp power supply. And the typical Android phone will take a half an amp, so like 500 milliamps. 28 divided by 2, that's 14 amps it would need to power all the devices. And 4 just, it doesn't cut it. So there were other things I didn't like about this hub. Like, although it looks like a 28-port hub, there's no such thing as a 28-port hub integrated circuit. So inside, it's like actually a bunch of cascaded hubs. So when you plug it in, it shows up like in Linux and your LSPCI, it's like hub, 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 hub. And this is really problematic because you'll see in a little bit here why that's a big problem. But so here's version 2.7. This is like only 4 more months after that last one. Got more devices, but I had to come up with a new design to actually start getting things back online. At this point, I only had ice cream sandwich and newer devices that I had plugged in. The devices on the left are all like gingerbread and older. I just stacked them up, kind of moved them aside. And this was when I was working on exploit development for a kernel vuln. So, and that only affected 4.0 plus, that's why I only hooked those up. And we'll demo that in a little bit, but it's old hat at this point. So issue 1, when I wanted to kind of, like, this is a makeshift thing, right? Like, I was like, okay, I have these things, let's hook them all up because I need to do some work. But when I got to 3.0, I was like, I really want to design this so that I don't have to play games anymore. Like, it'll scale to the maximum, whatever the maximum is. Like, how can I get there? And so it turns out USB has limitations. Like, there's a nesting depth, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like the Mondo hub, because it's already kind of like 4 nested deep or something. And so they have 7 is the maximum. The first time I bought all these, so I bought these hubs and stuff, and the first time I tried to hook up all the devices, I actually ran one hub to my computer, and then a hub to that hub, and a hub to that hub, and a hub to that hub, and a hub to that. So I had 8 hubs going into the PC. When I went to plug a device into the last hub, it was just like, Linux was like, you can't do this. It's like you've reached a maximum depth. So that's obviously not like a workable solution for a massively scalable thing, because that limits you. So we have 7-port hubs, right? That limits you to only 49 devices, or even less, because you're taking up ports for the hubs themselves. So it's kind of like you get 6 ports per hub times like 6. So what's that number? Come on, you can do it. 42. There we go. All right. So I was actually asking on Twitter. I like to crowdsource stuff occasionally. Got some good people, Travis Goodspeed and Sergey Bradis and Michael Osman and Dragorn. They're all, very well versed in USB stuff. So I was like, hey guys, like, how can I do this? How can I hit this? And I got responses like, oh, easy, you just send a whole bunch of fake registration requests and then just, and then I got other ones like, why would you want to do that? And then I got a good question, but do you need data? And the answer was yes, I need to talk to all these devices. So everybody's like, oh no, that's going to be tricky. So Osman gave me some really good information. He says the maximum I've seen on an IC, which is integrated circuit, is 7. So that was like, oh, epiphany. Like, I should never buy a hub that's more than 7 ports, because otherwise it's going to be some Mondo hub, trickery inside. So he also gave the information you need 21 hub ICs, and I guess Michael, being the kind of open source hardware guy that he is, he's thinking, I'm going to build like some board with lots of hub ICs and like run lots of wires and stuff. But I didn't go that route. I went the commercial off-the-shelf route. So this is the design I came up with that was the maximum number of devices that you could have. So you have the root hub on your PC. You connect it to one hub, and then you have 7 hubs going into that. And then you see the one on the right has 7 hubs going into it. and then there's 3 on the one on the left. This is the maximal configuration that you can have, where you can have 108 Android devices for one USB host. You hit pretty 127 pretty quickly, and actually in this design there's a few ports that you wouldn't be able to use, and I honestly have no idea what will happen if you try to plug something in beyond this number, so it might be interesting. So a builder off the recommendations of these guys, off Charlie Miller. Charlie told me back when he was doing his NFC research and was fuzzing NFC stuff, that these hubs were great because you can do software power control, and that means you can run like a command line program that says, turn off port 1, and it'll stay off until you're like, turn on port 2, or turn on port 1, and it'll turn back on. The Mondo Hub actually sort of supported this, but if you send a command, turn off port 1, it turned off port 1 and it came right back on. Oh, great, guys. So I bought lots of cables. I love monoprice. I told Alan my little adapter here for the presentation, that came from monoprice. They're a good price there. Buy lots of cables in bulk. The more you buy, the better price you get. One note, a 6-foot cable helps to have around. I also bought some extension cables, but they're not as robust as actually getting a real 6-foot cable. So if you're gonna be sitting at your desk and you don't want to have to keep getting up and going over to a table and touch the device and then go back, then the 6-foot cable really helps when you're interacting with one device. So I don't have enough devices to hit 127 or 108. So this is the current design right now for the cluster. You'll see it in a picture in a minute in real life, but I just have the one hub with 7 in, and that gives you 49 ports. When I got all these hubs and I started hooking them back up in a different way, like in the correct way, in this manner, another issue became apparent, and this is what I ran into. So these hubs come with these power warts, and the wall warts are okay. They support enough power for the hub and all the devices on it. But like clearly they don't fit on a regular power strip. They're a little oversized. So I was like, hey, this is 2.7. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, so I was like, I got to solve this. I don't have enough power strips or outlets in my office to like plug all these warts everywhere. So I looked around and I found some Bitcoin miners at this URL that they were talking about powering their USB-powered ASIC miners. And they actually were doing some cool stuff where they made a custom cable for an ATX power supply. And so I built one of these. And this is sort of the parts list and where I got the stuff. So I ordered it all, assembled it, and then I came up with this. Here's the cable. It's like, how long is that? I didn't put how long. This is like a 6-foot wire. The barrel was already on there with the little angle, and I just kind of like stuck the pins in the Molex thing, crimped it all, and put it together. It's fancy, but it's not that fancy. Dave Attell really wanted me to tell him where he could buy these manufacturers, but I have no idea. I didn't need that many. I only needed 10. So this one, this is the power cable's all wired up to the power supply. The important thing to note here about the power supply is it does have to supply enough power on the 5-volt rail. This is just a 350 watt power supply. It supplies no. So it supplies 35 amps on the 5-volt rail, so it's plenty to run all these devices. So at this point, I start thinking well, what about bigger scale, right? 108 is a lot, but I'd love to get there and then have this problem where how do I have more? So I mentioned before it's a USB host adapter that has these limitations. That's what's saying you can only have 7 deep. That's what's saying you can only have 127 devices. But so you can just add more host adapters, theoretically. You can get little PCIX ones, put them in there. Then you get another 108. Or what I think is a better solution is to use some small machine that you plug 108 into, and it has one USB host, but then it's kind of bridges to the network instead of just using USB. I think this is definitely something workable, and I think Ethernet is more than enough. I think even 100 megabit Ethernet is probably good enough to do the communications that typically go over USB. I think USB is fairly slow most of the time. Only like the brand new devices are supporting like super speed USB, and I think they're processor bound trying to do that fast anyway. So another problem is running out of physical space. As you can see, and I'm going to try to jump all the way back here. Maybe I have it still. No, I don't have it. Well, you'll see it in a second on the next slide, I think. Yeah. So at some point you run out of space, right? Like phones take up space. Putting them on a table. And another good one is like phones without batteries. I ran into this issue with phones and their batteries where a lot of them end up overcharging. And I don't know why they do this. It's a flaw in their charging logic or in their bootloader or whatever. And so what ends up happening with these lithium-ion batteries is they get swollen. And they look kind of scary. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Who's seen a lithium-ion battery that's swollen? Did you want to like play catch with it? I did not want my kid to have it or anything. So, and sometimes with the phones too, they'll like they'll swell and it'll like pop the back cover of the battery or the phone off. So that's not good. So I wanted to play around, and I haven't done this yet, but I wanted to play around with powering phones with an actual power supply instead of a battery. One of the downsides of that is like for like an Nexus 5 or other phones where there's no user service of a battery, then you have to damage your devices in order to pull it off. It's not really a happy thing to do. So I'm pondering a vertical solution. Like this is December 2013, which is, what was the first one? Let's see here. October, September. So it's like a year and a couple of months, year and a few months of doing this. And at this point, like this is everything hooked up. All these devices were live at that point. And since then I've moved houses and I had to take this down. And now this is what it looked like Monday when I packed up everything to come out here. So you can see there's a lot of devices. I've even added a few since this other picture here. Right now it's 48, like we said, and like you can see from this guy, these commands over here. So let's get into like the tools a little bit further. So no tools like this existed. AppTlack, AppKudo, those guys, they give you an SDK to like work with their stuff. The reasons why you wouldn't use them for security research aside, like they give you SDK, but they don't give you the tools to build your own thing that they have. They give you like a client to a RESTful service that talks to their stuff. And I mean, that's useful for, I'm sure, for app developers doing scalable testing, but it's not that useful for a security researcher, especially somebody trying to, have all the phones in their lab. So I set out to really just do these real simple features. I mentioned provisioning quickly. I mentioned the human-friendly names. I mentioned the transient devices, so the ability to disable. I mean, think about it. If you have all these devices registered, but like you unplug one and you try to run a command against all of them, it's going to like sit there trying to talk to that one that's not there. Or it might spit out some error message on you instead of like give you the results that are more uniform. So you have to be able to handle that. And the main thing that I wanted is to be able to run things against more than one device at a time. So the tools are already open source. They're on my GitHub here at this URL. They're not rocket science. All they are is some Ruby scripts that just wrap the ADB binary. It's really not amazing, but what you can do with it is amazing. So there's good documentation that explains all the different usage scenarios. It's simple, but it's elegant and powerful. You can talk to one device. There's a script where you can say, hey, I want to start a session with this device, and then you can just run the ADB command normally, like you would, and it will ignore all the other devices. Like if you're here and you do like ADB shell, it's just going to tell you you have more than one device. That's useless, right? But if we wanted to do like a shell on the Moto X, then we can do like ADB shell now, and it works just fine. So that's really good for focusing in on a single device. One thing I recommend if you're going to play with these tools, or even do any research on Android devices, through ADB, you want to check out this patch, because one of the things that it fails to do, the ADB fails to do, is share your terminal settings across the USB connection. So you'll shell in, and it's just like SSHing, except for the fact that it doesn't have a mechanism to tell the device like how big your screen is. So you shell in, and it always thinks your screen is 80 by 25. I don't know who has an 80 by 25 screen anymore. Yeah, so like all this thing does is it just, it runs a quick command. It's actually built into the ADB binary, runs BusyBox real quick to tell the terminal settings, and then drops you to a shell. I also recommend BusyBox heavily. Like a lot of Android devices, they have this thing called Toolbox or Motobox or whatever. It's just a really stripped down version of BusyBox. I think BusyBox had like a GPL license, and I think in Android land that didn't really want to do GPL stuff for their shells. And so they don't use BusyBox, or at least the full one. They kind of re-implemented it from clean room or something. But BusyBox is still a great tool. A lot of devices don't have like the grep command. I don't know, I think everyone who does security research from a command line would not live without the grep command. So that solves that problem. And also, the newest BusyBox binary, and I don't know if Jay's in the room, but I think he's probably around somewhere. I saw him earlier. He has been hooking me up with these builds of BusyBox that he's been doing, where he's actually ported in SE Linux support, and he's doing it the right way. You know, there's a lot of BusyBox binaries. When I first jumped into Android security, there was like a dozen different BusyBox binaries you could find. All of them were like really poorly compiled, and so you'd run a command against the device, like the ID command. And if you look at up here, these 3 lines where we got them from the device, you can see that there's human-friendly names, but there's also numbers, right? And that also applies to like oh no, what happened? I did the wrong thing. Is this not mcdo? Sorry, guys. So it also applies to like LSing files and stuff. These are really important things. You know, when you're auditing an Android device, you want to know the permissions of certain things. You want to see that it's owned by the shell user. You don't want to see the number 2000. So that's really important, and that's one of the things that it's great to use Sorix BusyBox binary for. Also, there's the Android L release, and he's working. I think he's got a build for Android L, although I haven't tested it yet since I had to come out here. Supporting data, this is another side note, right? You have like 50 devices. You want to have stock firmware for it in case something goes horribly wrong. You know, say you've rooted the device, or say you're trying to play with something in the kernel and it crashes at a really inopportune time and kind of bricks the device. You want to be able to recover them. So stock ROMs are really good to have. You can also do great research offline without the devices, which is not really much good for exploit development, but it's definitely good for extracting offsets or other information. Definitely for getting binaries to do reverse engineering or something like that. So it's kind of like invaluable to have stock ROMs, but also source code. Like an ASP checkout is although it's gigantic, it includes lots of stuff that you're going to want to have, like a tool chain that works. It's going to give you the base source code. It's going to give you the exact code for Nexus devices. And also the Linux kernels are all GPL by the nature of the Linux kernel. So those sources are all nice too. You can work from both sides on this. Like you may be like auditing the Linux kernel for a particular device and see some vulnerability. You want to go see, is that driver present on any device that you have? You can do that really quickly with these tools. I think right now, all in all, I think I have like almost 300 gigs of supporting data for all the devices, including the AOSP checkout and all the stock ROMs. Another thing that with stock ROMs, like you want to get different versions because there may be things that patched along the way or changed along the way. And you want to keep updating your devices to keep them current as well. So there's more info on the supporting data. Okay, I'll go, let's see. I don't know how far I am, but we'll go for it. So there's more info in the Android Hacker's Handbook and also slides from the previous talk, the one I mentioned in another talk before that. So let's do some more demos. So we're doing all device interaction. Like another good thing to do is to see the system on chip. You can kind of do that real easy with, so you can do this, and this, you can see like the devices at the top, they're MSM, so that's Qualcomm. You can see OMAP. This one command can quickly show you, what system on chip is inside of each device. You don't have to go and look for, the device database online or something to figure these out. It's great to be able to query it from the device right away. I showed the user privileges earlier. We can do a quick command where we see like which ones are rooted. And that just runs the SU binary. So these are like slightly modified in that they have SU installed. Pretty much the only modification I usually do. Put BusyBox on there and then SU them. I put SU in. The other thing to mention, like these devices are all completely in airplane mode. Like they're not connected to any network right now. They're not on a Wi-Fi. They're not on any mobile network. And that's important for a bunch of different reasons. But I won't go into those. So another good thing, I mentioned the driver thing, like you may want to check, oh, is the Exynos MEM vulnerability like present? Oh, look, those two devices are probably vulnerable. You know, what about like PVR, what about this other driver, or that one there, look at it. And you get a really quick and easy feel for like kind of the breadth of a vulnerability may reach, right? Like this one is clearly on a lot more devices than the Exynos MEM, which was only 2. So that kind of information is really great when you're assessing how bad something can be. Comparing devices, that's another one. I don't have a lot of good demos for this, but the Samsung Galaxy S3 was very similar to the Galaxy Nexus, and I know I'm using old phones here, but like there are newer phones that are the same situation. And it's really nice to compare things against a Nexus device because then you really start to see what happened between when Google released the code and the OEMs changed things and the proprietary drivers got it added in. You know, all these things that happened along the way between Google making a release and the device going to market. So you can end up with people like laxing file system permissions. You can end up with people adding new programs that run at boot that may be insecure, all kinds of stuff. So these are all great things to compare like 2 devices against each other, especially with Nexus devices. So other tasks, we can install apps to all the devices. I don't know if I have actually, I don't have an APK to install right here. But I've definitely done this. I used this cluster a couple of times to help a few people out with different testing at scale. I think Colin Molnar did some work with instrumentation, dynamic instrumentation for different things, which they used to then patch the last year's master key vulnerability. Everybody hates that term too, but it was really popular in media, so that's what people know. So I used that to test some of that, and also their Patch Droid project, him and John Overhide's Patch Droid project used to do some testing for that. Also, the most complicated thing I think I've done with it was to test this add JavaScript interface vulnerability. This is like a really awful vulnerability where the browser, the stock browser on an Android device would actually allow you to execute shell commands remotely just by visiting any website. And so I mentioned earlier on, it's hard to know exactly what may or may not be vulnerable because of all the things that happen along the way. Sure, I could find the commits in the Android OS, the open source project, but that doesn't really tell me did the OEM ever patch the vuln. It doesn't tell me did the OEM fix the vuln before they released it by some magic, or it doesn't tell me anything really. It doesn't tell me if the OEM is vulnerable to some variation. So I put together like a bunch of stuff to test it, and it took like I think a few days, but actually managed to automate like provisioning a Wi-Fi network and turning on Wi-Fi, then like loading the page, taking a screenshot, and then like turning it all back off again and going back into like sneaky mode. It actually revealed some very interesting information. There's a blog on the DroidSec website about some of the things it revealed, including some things that were vulnerable to variations, and some people who actually backported patches for this vulnerability to things that were quite old actually. Devices that were quite old, like the HTC Thunderbolt, which is the first 4G phone or something. So we won't do the final demo. Let's do the exploit real quick, since we only got a couple minutes. So we don't want to RM it. Let's see. Let's push it to all the devices. It says error, but that's just because the stuff went to the stderr, the standard error output stream. But it went to all of them. So CV, we'll see. That looks good. Well, we'll just go ahead and run this exploit on all these devices. It takes a little longer on devices that are newer than 4.1 because of additional kernel hardening, but it only takes longer. It doesn't stop the exploit. It just takes a little longer. The exploit just prints UID equals 0 if it gets root. That's pretty much it. So we'll let it run for a minute. You don't have to clap. We can clap if you want. Whatever you want to do, it's okay. Like I said, this is an old exploit. It was from last year. Oh no, it crashed on the G1. I don't think it's vulnerable anyway. My binary is probably compiled with a too new of compiler. So yeah, it takes a little while. The ones that are not with that hardening, it's pretty much instant. But the ones that are that take a little more time, it's because the exploit is actually like scanning all of kernel memory with the vulnerability, finding out where all the symbols are in the kernel, and then figuring out where are the things that I need to do the exploit. Let's see, what else we got? So I have a final demo here where we run scripts. I don't know if this is ready. Let me go ahead and stop this thing. I don't know which window it is in. That's the thing. Like, let's see. Kernel, kconfig or something. Yeah, that looks really good actually. But then that's running, that's RMing it. I don't want to RM it. So that's not push. That's push. Pushing busybox, pushing more busybox, pushing super SU. That's not a good way to do it. Check kconfig. Come on, you can do it. It's up there somewhere. There we go. Okay, now this is an older version of the scripts, so that it has like a different command here. Oh no. No, no, no. Where's the scripts? It's there. Clearly that command is really old. I haven't ran it in a while. So what else? Sending intents and fuzzing are another great thing you can do with this. It's a little bit weird to fuzz with a heterogeneous group because you get really sort of weird results, right? And then you end up finding vulnerabilities that are only on one device or only trigger on one device. And a lot of times, especially with devices that are older, they're really old and well-known vulnerabilities. They're already patched. I did do some fuzzing for the Android Hacker Handbook for the fuzzing chapter. Did some USB fuzzing, and oh man, has it been that long already? There's we did some intent fuzzing, and then there was one other section on, what was that on fuzzing? Oh, the browser, yeah. So I fuzzed the browser for a long time on Android devices. And the reason, a lot of people ask me, why would you do that, right? Like, why would you fuzz on an actual Android device? I'm like, who knows what happened, right? Like, they might have custom patches that somebody threw in there, and then, you know, they threw it on there. So that's why I did that. We pushed, let's see the chmod one. So the check kconfig one is pretty neat. I think I could just type the command much faster than this. This is ridiculous. Maybe not. Yeah, look at that. It's so fast. Love it. So these are, it's doing right now in serial all the commands, so it runs one on one and waits for the response. I want to like rework the scripts a little bit so that instead I can run them in parallel, so then the results will just come back asynchronously as the devices are ready to give them up. So with check kconfig, we can do stuff like look for the kernel version, right? Or not the kernel version, but the heap implementation that's used by the kernel. So here we're looking like which devices are using the slub allocator in the kernel. Oh no, the dreaded 0. Let's go conclusion, right? So there were various problems that appeared over time. I talked about a bunch of them. A lot of the motivation of the talk was to tell you guys all the ways that I failed, so if you really want to do this and you want to put something together like this, that you don't have to make all the same fails I did. I really believe in, and that's an important role that we have in the community. Still, even with everything hooked up, like I hooked everything back up Monday, and there were, like, I'd hook everything up and then like something wouldn't work, so I'd have to like plug it into a different hub, and then it would work. But it made no sense. It wasn't the cable, it wasn't the hub. It was some sort of weird, like, thing. Haven't figured that one out yet. But sometimes devices fall off, sometimes devices come back. Like you can see in my logs here, there's some devices keeps popping off and on constantly. So these things are all things that you'll notice. Random sounds like batteries getting fully charged. It'll be like, bloop, 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 and you're like, which one was it? I don't know which one to go touch now. You can imagine if they were all on a phone network, somebody started calling them, you'd really get unfortunate, really get kind of pissy. Which one is it? It's the ringing one, I guess, but when the screens are all off and it's making sound, it's really not useful. So the future directions, I want to get more devices. I always ask people to donate devices. Anybody that doesn't have, or anybody that has stuff that they don't want. The problem is, when I give a talk like this, it really takes away people's motivations to give me their Android devices. I'm not sure why. But it's okay. I'm living with the fact. So there's also some further automation that I want to do. I mentioned these tools, PrivMap, Can has access. There's some scripts I've written to do some device diffing, like to automate a little bit. These are all great things to do, and I'll work on these soon. PrivMap and Can has access. Those are two tools that I wrote, which kind of do like device auditing in a sort of different way than what people normally do. Like Can has access looks at permissions on file system. Like normally, if you audit a file system, you would use the find command. You'd run find /-perm like plus 4,000 look for set UIDs or something like that. So you end up having to run a whole bunch of commands. And instead, I just wrote Can has access, which is one binary. You run it, works on all the devices, and instead it'll give you like a prioritized list of, lacks permissions. It'll be like, here's your world writable directories. These are not good. Here's your set UID binaries. Those might be interesting to look at. Here's your like, I don't know, writable files in special directories like /data misc or something. So that's a good thing to use. And PrivMap I created because Android is a very privilege separated operating system in that a lot of different services speak with each other, and they all have different permissions. And some permissions are required for you to talk to one, and then some have certain permissions. So if you, with such a system, sometimes it gets to the point where you have to exploit kind of a chain of things to get what you want. And PrivMap can help you kind of map out your path through the system. Other things to automate is automated firmware switching. That's nice. So I'm open to suggestions if you guys have ideas. It is on GitHub. The tools are. You can email me. The emails are going to be, it's widely available, but emails at the end here. In conclusion, the device differences make things difficult, It's just a real pain, but if you want to get a good broad view of things, you need to have access to something like this. It can definitely help with the problem like the Qualcomm guy mentioned, like where he has no idea. If they had like all the devices, which I guess was probably within Qualcomm's reach, then they could totally say, oh yeah, we found this hole and somebody reported it. These are the devices that are affected because we tested them, like with our POC. That'd be awesome. It's worth the investment in my opinion. I think overall I spent about $10,000, not of all my own money, but that's everything overall, like with the Mondo Hub that died and like some devices that died. And that's like, I don't think that's that much for, 50 Android devices. So use the recommended hardware design, look for devices, follow the guidelines for buying, use the tools, let me know, join the channel. We're going to do a book giveaway, so for all those suckers who already walked out of the door, they won't know about this book giveaway now. We have 250 copies of Android Hacker's Handbook in the vendor, what do you call that? The business hall? Is that what we're calling it? Vendor area. Vendor area, not business hall.
Business hall is official, but everybody will know the vendor area.
I don't know, where everybody is really loud and giving away free booze right now, I think. But you can go there, and we have all the books. If you want to come tomorrow at the bookstore, which is right up in the front by the escalator, we're going to sign books. 4 of the authors are here. Unfortunately, the 2 European guys didn't come over. But so free books and free signatures. You guys can ask me anything. I think
You got 5 minutes for questions.
he's not going to kick us out yet. So does anybody have a question? Okay, James, I know you're trolling me.
Have
Sirs?
you thought about instead of just using other
Oh, good question.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I will repeat the question. So that's a good question. James asks, have I thought about using other Android devices, Android powered devices like TV, Android TV stuff, or Google TV? I actually have one, but I haven't hooked it up. It's in the box like I was moving, so I haven't had time to play around with it yet. I've got a Fire TV, so I've got a few things, and I have thought about it, but I haven't done a lot, actually. Amir Etemadi, who works with me at Occupant, he's heavily focused on that stuff with his GTV hacker group. They're speaking at DEF CON about, what was it, owning all the things or something? It should be cool. I think they're going to have dual core on stage even. But so they focus on that, so I haven't tried to focus on that too much. Although the exploit that I demoed, I've definitely tested on his Google TV setup. He has a similar setup that's just Google TV. Anybody else have a question? Yes? Okay. I can't hear you. Demo, yes? You're not seriously going to kick us out, are you?
I gotta get my bag out of the room after that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Demo you showed, what flavor of OS was it running? For Android, the 2013 6282.
The vulnerability, the exploit?
Yeah, what flavor was it? Was it like gingerbread or?
Okay, so Android, it affects the Linux kernel, certain versions of the Linux kernel, but it's only on ARM, so it's actually a more broad vulnerability than just Android. So it would affect some, like, Soho routers and things like that. But in my testing on Android, it affected 4.0 all the way up until they patched it, which was right around when 4.4 was released.
Thanks.
I think some devices shipped with 4.3, like the Note 3, and it was already patched. So the Qualcomm guys got wind of this, and they got the word out, and things got fixed. So it's cool. It's good. Yes.
When you were working with the mobile app testing companies, were you successfully able to root any of their devices, and did any of them detect you?
I did not try to root any of their devices. No, I did. Yeah, I don't want to cross that line, right? If they don't root the devices, like that's no. I'm sure I could root all of them, but I don't want to root them. So I talked a little bit with AppTwack. The guys seem to be pretty cool, so I want to talk to them more. And see if there's some way we can work together, or maybe even if they just have excess devices they don't want and give them to me or something, I don't know. They probably won't be happy when I give out the slides to this, because then everyone will be building their own thing that is their whole business model. So, yeah. They do have a lot more layers on top, of course, because they have to automate app testing, pushing buttons and stuff like that. So that's it, unless anyone has one, two last questions. Any questions? No more questions? All right, thank you.